The room was cold and still, the silence broken only by the faint ticking of a clock mounted high on the wall. Jamal sat handcuffed to a metal chair in the center of a dimly lit interrogation room. His shoulders were relaxed, his face calm, but his eyes told a different story. Jamal glanced down at his cuffed wrists, the steel biting into his skin. His mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. How had it come to this? That morning had started like any other. The sun peeked through the blinds of Jamal's modest apartment, casting warm light onto the neatly arranged furniture. Jamal stirred awake, stretching as the soft hum of the city filtered through his window. Jamal Thompson was a 22-year-old who prided himself on discipline and routine. His life was simple and predictable, and he liked it that way. He was calm, quiet, and hardworking, a man who avoided trouble at all costs. He poured himself a cup of coffee, glancing at the small notepad on his kitchen counter. It was his grocery list, carefully written the night before. Milk, eggs, bread, and a few other essentials. Jamal wasn't the type to let things pile up. Whether it was work or errands, he liked to get things done as soon as possible. And today was no different. He had planned his Saturday with precision, a quick trip to Walmart in the morning, then an afternoon to himself, peaceful and uninterrupted. As he pulled on a light jacket and grabbed his keys, Jamal took one last look around his apartment. Everything was in its place, just the way he liked it. He locked the door behind him, his thoughts already on the errands ahead. The parking lot at Walmart was bustling with activity. Cars lined every row, their doors slamming shut as families made their way inside. Jamal parked near the entrance and stepped out, the cool morning air brushing against his face. Inside, the store was alive with the chatter of shoppers and the faint beeping of cash registers. He grabbed a cart and started moving through the aisles, his focus entirely on his list. Jamal liked being thorough. He carefully inspected each item, making sure it was just right before placing it into his cart. As he reached for a loaf of bread, a child ran past him, laughing as his parent called out for him to slow down. Jamal smiled faintly, his focus never wavering. When his cart was full, he headed toward the checkout lanes. The lines were long, but Jamal didn't mind. He was patient, unbothered by the chaos around him. Finally, he found a lane that seemed to be moving quickly. The cashier, a young woman named Sophia, was scanning items with mechanical precision. Jamal rolled his cart forward and waited for his turn. "Hello, I'd like to check out, please," he said when it was his turn, his voice calm and polite. But Sophia didn't respond. She didn't even look at him. Instead, she motioned for the person behind him to step forward. Jamal frowned but stayed silent. He figured she must not have heard him, so he waited. Minutes passed, and Jamal watched as Sophia continued to ignore him, serving one customer after another. Jamal was confused. He glanced around, wondering if maybe there had been some kind of misunderstanding. But it was becoming increasingly clear that this wasn't a mistake. Sophia wasn't ignoring him by accident. She was doing it on purpose. After waiting for over 15 minutes, Jamal finally spoke up. His voice was calm, but there was a firmness in his tone. "I've been waiting for a while now. Can you just check me out?" Sophia looked up at him then, her expression cold and dismissive. Her lips curled into a slight sneer as she replied, "If you can't have patience, you should just leave." The words hung in the air, sharp and cutting. The other shoppers had noticed by now. Heads turned, conversations stopped. All eyes were on Jamal and Sophia. Jamal took a deep breath, his frustration simmering just beneath the surface. He hated being the center of attention, but he couldn't let this slide. "I'm not trying to cause any problems," he said, his voice steady. "I just want to pay for my groceries and leave." Sophia rolled her eyes and crossed her arms. "Not my problem," she muttered loud enough for the people nearby to hear. The tension in the air was thick. A few shoppers shuffled awkwardly, unsure of whether to intervene or stay silent. Jamal stood his ground, his hands resting lightly on the handle of his cart. "I've been standing here for over 15 minutes while you've served everyone else. Just check me out so I can leave." Sophia's voice grew louder, her frustration evident. "I said leave if you don't like it. I don't have to deal with this right now." The raised voices drew even more attention. Customers in nearby lanes turned to watch, their faces a mix of curiosity and discomfort. Jamal felt their stares like a weight on his shoulders. He didn't want this. He didn't want the attention, the whispers, the judgment, but what choice did he have? He had done nothing wrong. Sophia grabbed the store phone, her voice loud and clear as she spoke into the receiver. "There's a man here causing a disturbance," she said, her eyes locking onto Jamal. The words hit Jamal like a punch to the gut. He stood frozen, his hands gripping the cart as he tried to process what was happening. The shoppers around him fell silent. The accusation hung heavy in the air, undeniable and damning. Minutes later, the distant wail of sirens grew louder, cutting through the store's usual hum. Jamal felt his chest tighten as he realized what was about to happen. When the doors swung open, Officer Nathan Roberts stepped inside. He was tall and broad, his uniform crisp and his expression hard. He scanned the scene quickly, his eyes settling on Jamal. The officer didn't ask questions. He didn't take a moment to assess the situation. He took one look at Jamal and decided he was the problem. "Step outside," Roberts ordered, his voice firm and unyielding. Jamal tried to explain, his voice calm but steady. "I'm just trying to pay for my groceries." "She's the one who—" Roberts cut him off. "I said step outside." When Jamal didn't move quickly enough, Roberts grabbed his arm. The grip was rough, and Jamal instinctively pulled away. What happened next wasn't something Jamal planned. It wasn't something he even thought about. It was pure instinct, a reflex born from years of martial arts training. In one fluid motion, Jamal twisted out of the officer's grip, using the momentum to push him off balance. Before he realized what had happened, Roberts was on the ground, his face red with anger. The store erupted into chaos. Shoppers gasped, some stepping back, while others reached for their phones to record the unfolding scene. Jamal's heart was pounding. He hadn't meant to escalate things, but he also couldn't just let himself be manhandled without reason. Roberts scrambled to his feet, his expression a mix of rage and humiliation. He reached for his radio, barking into it as the sound of more sirens filled the air. Backup was on the way. Jamal could hear the faint echo of approaching cars, their sirens growing louder with each passing second. He stood still, his hands at his sides as he prepared for what was coming next. The situation had spiraled out of control, and Jamal knew there was no going back now. The store was in chaos. Shoppers murmured nervously, some stepping back while others stayed frozen, their phones out, recording every second. Officer Roberts climbed back to his feet, his face flushed with anger. Backup arrived almost immediately. The faint wail of sirens outside grew deafening as more squad cars pulled up to the store. Officers poured in, their hands hovering near their holsters, their eyes scanning the scene. Jamal stood still, his hands visible at his sides. His heart pounded, not from fear, but from frustration and disbelief. He wanted to explain, to plead his case, but he knew it wouldn't matter, not now. "Put your hands behind your back," Roberts barked, his voice sharp and unrelenting. Jamal didn't resist. Slowly, he raised his hands and complied, feeling the cold steel of the handcuffs snap tightly around his wrists. As they led him out of the store, the murmurs turned into hushed whispers. Through the glass doors, Jamal saw the flashing lights of police cars. The officers guided him toward one of the vehicles, their grips firm but not rough. It was then that he caught sight of her, Sophia. She stood by the register, her arms crossed, a small, smug smile tugging at the corners of her lips. She didn't have to say a word. Her expression said it all. She had already won. The officers placed Jamal into the back seat of a squad car. The door closed with a loud thud, sealing him inside. The ride to the station was quiet, but Jamal's thoughts were anything but. How had a simple trip to the grocery store turned into this? He replayed the events in his mind, searching for the moment it had all gone wrong. The interrogation room was stark and cold, the kind of place designed to make a person feel small. Jamal sat at the table, his hands cuffed in front of him, his eyes fixed on the wall ahead. His mind raced. Would they even listen to his side of the story? Or had they already made up their minds the moment they saw him? The door opened, and an officer stepped inside, his expression neutral but unreadable. He placed a file on the table and sat across from Jamal. "We've had complaints about you causing a disturbance," the officer said, his tone clipped. Jamal exhaled deeply, keeping his voice calm. "I wasn't causing a disturbance. I was just trying to check out my groceries." The officer didn't respond immediately. flipping through the pages in the file. The silence was suffocating. Hours passed, and Jamal remained in the room, his frustration growing with every tick of the clock. But he stayed calm. Losing his temper wouldn't help. Then a knock came at the door. Another officer entered, this one accompanied by a middle-aged man, a witness from the store. The man had seen everything. He explained what had really happened, from Sophia's repeated dismissal of Jamal to the officer's aggressive actions. His account was clear, detailed, and unwavering. The officers exchanged glances before leaving the room. Jamal sat quietly, his heart pounding as he waited for what felt like an eternity. Finally, they returned, this time with a laptop in hand. They reviewed the security footage. Every detail was there. The long minutes Jamal had waited patiently, the way Sophia had ignored him, and the moment he had defended himself against Roberts' aggressive hold. The truth was undeniable. Jamal had done nothing wrong. The next morning, Jamal was released. An officer unlocked the cuffs and gestured toward the exit. The police chief offered an apology, his words careful and rehearsed, but they felt hollow to Jamal, like a formality rather than genuine regret. Officer Nathan Roberts faced disciplinary action. His aggressive behavior had been captured not only on security footage, but also on the phones of multiple witnesses. As for Sophia, her smirk had disappeared. She was terminated from her position at Walmart, her actions deemed unacceptable by the store's management. Jamal left the station quietly, his thoughts heavy. The morning sunlight was warm against Jamal's face as he stepped outside. The world had kept moving while he was inside, but for him, time had felt frozen. He had been vindicated, but the weight of the experience lingered. He couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about him. This was about a system that judged people before hearing their story, a system that saw skin before humanity. Jamal walked down the street, his hands in his pockets, his mind replaying the events. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened, and he knew it wouldn't be the last. How many others had been in his position, but with no witnesses to speak up for them, no cameras to capture the truth? The story ends with a powerful reflection. This wasn't just Jamal's story. It's a story too many have lived, and it's a story that needs to change.